Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking partnerships. You know, that exciting but sometimes kind of scary thing about teaming up to launch a business.
It is scary.
It can be, right? So we're diving deep to help equip you with the knowledge and tools you'll need
Absolutely.
to make that partnership really work.
You know, starting a business with a partner can definitely boost your chances of success, but
Mm,
as I'm sure many of you know, partnerships can be super complex.
definitely.
And unfortunately, partner conflict, as we all know, is one of the leading causes of business failure.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You're pouring your heart and soul into this new venture.
Right.
The last thing you want is for things to just fall apart because
Yeah.
you and your partner just
Right.
disagree, or you have these misunderstandings about like roles and responsibilities and all that.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah,
So that's why we're going to be exploring this book, The Partnership Charter by David Gage.
this is a good one.
It's a fantastic book, and it's really a practical guide to navigating all the complexities of partnerships.
And actually, this book is packed with real-world stories and practical advice that is just going to really help
It is.
set you up for success. So
Yeah,
let's just jump right in. What do you think?
let's do it. So I always like to think of a partnership charter like a fire escape plan for your business. You know,
Right.
you hope you'll never have to use it,
Right.
but it's essential to have that plan in place in case things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a way to navigate out of a tricky situation,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to something as important as your business.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of things going wrong, the book actually starts off with a story about Manganaro Foods,
Oh, yeah.
this famous New York institution
Hmm.
that had been around for over a century. And it ended up getting caught up in this really messy family lawsuit.
Wow.
Can you imagine? I mean, a business that had been around for 100 years,
Yeah.
torn apart because of, conflicts between the partners.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking because you think about all the history,
Right, exactly.
all the work, and then to have it sort of fall apart because of these unresolved issues.
And I think it's just a stark reminder that even strong relationships, even family relationships, can crack under pressure.
Totally. Which is why clarifying things right from the get-go is absolutely crucial.
Mhm.
And that's where the partnership charter comes in.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about the legalities. It's about being proactive, addressing those potentially sensitive issues
Right.
that could blow up into major problems later on.
And the book does a really good job of making this distinction, like legal documents. That's about the what,
The what?
like
Yeah.
who owns what percentage. But a charter, that's about the how and the why of your partnership.
Right.
How you're going to actually work together, how you're going to make decisions together.
Yeah. Yeah. How are we going to function as a team, as a unit?
And I think it's really helpful to think about it as like laying the foundation for a strong and stable building.
I love that analogy. It's so true because if you don't have that strong foundation,
Right.
things are going to start to crumble and you're going to have problems down the line.
And, a perfect example of this is actually a story in the book about Jeff and Beth, the founders of Star Systems.
Oh, yeah, I remember them.
Yeah, so they were like best friends,
They were.
but they ended up clashing big time over their company valuation,
That's so common, though.
isn't it?
You know, people start out with this great personal bond. They think, oh, we're friends, we're family, it's going to be easy. But then when it comes down to the brass tacks,
Exactly.
things can get really complicated.
And that's why it doesn't matter how strong that personal bond is, you really need to be thinking about those potential conflict areas early on.
Totally.
Okay, so let's dive into creating a partnership charter.
Okay.
What do you think is the first step here?
Well, I think the first step is all about crafting a shared vision. You know, really getting on the same page with your partner about where you want to go with the business. Like, what is the ultimate destination of this partnership?
Because it's more than just about, making money.
Right, exactly.
It's about purpose. It's about...
It's about that driving force behind why you're doing this.
Right.
Are you trying to solve a particular problem in the market?
Mm-hmm.
Are you passionate about building a certain kind of company culture? You know, what is it that really lights you up?
And once you have that big picture vision, you can start to articulate it in a mission statement,
Yes.
right? Like a clear, concise statement of what your business does and how you are actually going to achieve that vision.
Absolutely. And the book gives a great example of this with Mail 2000.
Oh, yeah. They're the ones that ended up getting bought by UPS.
That's right, for $100 million.
That's incredible.
They had a really clear vision of improving service and reducing cost in the bulk mail industry, but their mission was hyper-focused on creating this network of printers across the country that would revolutionize the industry.
That's a great example of how a mission statement can take, like this grand vision,
Yeah,
and translate it into like a practical roadmap.
exactly. So it's a great way to get from that aspiration to an actual plan of action.
Okay, so we have a vision, we have mission statement. What's next?
Well, of course, we can't forget about values.
Values.
Those guiding principles that really shape everything you do in the business.
Hmm.
And they're so important because they really define the character of your business. They're going to influence how you make decisions, how you treat your employees, how you interact with customers, and ultimately, how you achieve your vision.
And, the book actually brings back Yahoo as an example here.
Oh, yeah, I love this one.
They were famously like frugal.
They were.
Even when they were making a ton of money, and it wasn't just about saving money, it was this really deep commitment to running a super lean and efficient operation.
Right. And it really permeated the entire company culture. And I think it's a great example of how values aren't just these empty words. They need to be reflected in your actions and decisions every single day. And I think that's a really important takeaway.
Okay, so we have our vision, mission, values. We're feeling pretty good. But how do we actually get there?
Well, that's where your strategic plan comes in. Think of it as your business's GPS system,
I like that.
guiding you towards your destination. And it might feel overwhelming at first, but the book really does break it down to some manageable steps.
Okay.
You need to define both your short-term and your long-term goals. Identify your target market, figure out what resources you have, and anticipate any potential roadblocks you might face.
And I think this is something that can, it's tempting to just create this really rigid,
Yes.
set in stone document, but really,
It needs to be flexible.
Exactly.
It needs to be adaptable because as your business grows and changes, your strategic plan should grow and change with it.
and the book actually gives us a really cool example of InterQ,
Oh, yeah.
this IT company that really had this vision of,
A very open, transparent management style.
right, and they actually built this right into their strategic plan
From the very beginning.
from day one.
And, years later, they've actually managed to retain their core team, which is amazing in the IT industry. And I think it's a testament to the fact that having a well-defined management style outlined in your strategic plan can really create a happy and stable work environment.
Yeah, which is so important because, as we know, retaining talent is like absolutely key
Oh, yeah, it's the lifeblood of any company.
to a thriving business.
Absolutely. And speaking of crucial elements, let's not forget about money,
Oh, yes, money.
the lifeblood.
Yes, very important.
Yeah, it can be a major source of conflict in partnerships, so it's so important to address it head on in the partnership charter.
Right, right. And I mean,
Those conversations happening early.
in the book, it encourages you to like have those sometimes awkward conversations
Yeah.
about money up front, like what are your spending style?
Yeah, are we both comfortable taking on debt? Do we want to bootstrap this?
How are we going to invest profits?
All of these things.
And I think,
It's not always easy.
not always comfortable, right?
No, but it's essential for building that strong foundation of trust
Right.
and avoiding financial disagreements later on. Nobody wants to have those arguments down the road.
And again, the book comes back to Jeff and Beth.
Oh, Jeff and Beth.
He wanted a salary of $425,000.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And his partners thought that was way too high, especially for the early stage company.
Yeah, you got to be realistic.
So they ended up negotiating, and they landed on a lower figure. But I think it's just a good example of how
Compromise is key,
compromise is key.
and that open communication is so important.
Okay, so we've laid a lot of groundwork. Vision, mission, values, strategic plan, finances.
We're making progress.
Yeah, so now let's talk about dividing up the pie. Ownership.
Yeah, this is the big one.
That's it.
This is where you determine who owns what percentage of the company, and it's often where things can get really tricky.
Especially when you're not all contributing the same amount of money or the same types of resources.
Exactly. You know,
Right.
it's not just about who puts in the most cash up front. It's about recognizing and valuing all contributions. Time, skills, connections, ideas, all of that needs to be factored into the equation.
And let's say, you're thinking about a 50-50 split.
Sure.
Seems pretty straightforward. Right.
Right.
Fair.
Well,
Easy.
on a surface.
Yeah. But what if you and your partner have very different ideas about how the business should be run?
Right.
Or like who gets to make the final call?
Yeah, that 50-50 split can actually lead to deadlock if you haven't established a clear process for making decisions and resolving disagreements.
It's like a recipe for disaster almost.
It can be.
Mm.
And the book highlights a software company where one of the partners actually felt like their contributions weren't reflected in their ownership.
Oh, wow.
And it led to a lot of tension, even though on paper, the split was equal. So it's a good reminder that a simple solution might not be the best fit for every partnership.
Absolutely.
And that's why the partnership charter really encourages you to explore different ownership models,
Okay.
like majority minority ownership, for example.
Where one partner has like the controlling interest.
Exactly. But of course, that can have its own set of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to choose the model that really aligns with your individual contributions, your comfort level with risk, and the overall needs of the business.
And the book shares this great example of 5 friends who partnered to launch a new product, and negotiating ownership was like a real test of their friendship.
I bet.
But they ended up finding a creative solution where they actually issued additional shares to create these incentives and ensure that everyone felt like they were valued.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that flexibility and a willingness to compromise are essential for finding an ownership structure that works for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground already,
I know it's a lot to take in.
but there's still so much more to explore. So we're going to take a quick break,
Sounds good.
and we'll be back in a few minutes to continue our deep dive into the partnership charter.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Before we jump back into the partnership charter, there was something the book was really emphasizing early on that I wanted to kind of touch on.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
I think it's this idea of understanding your why. Like, why are you even choosing to be an entrepreneur in the first place? And then why a partner?
Yeah, it's such a great question because I think a lot of people rush into partnerships without really taking the time to understand their own motivations. They focus on the what, like what business am I going to start, but they don't understand the deeper why behind their entrepreneurial drive.
And the book actually tells a story about Peter and Steve.
Oh, yeah.
They started a software company together. And Peter, he had this brilliant idea, but he lacked the confidence to go it alone. So he really needed someone,
Someone to lean on.
yeah, to share the burden with. And so he partners with Steve, who is like a marketing whiz.
Okay.
And they agree on a 55-45 ownership split with Peter's the majority owner. But as the company starts to grow, Peter starts to like resent that split.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he feels like he deserves more, even though Steve was like instrumental in their success.
Right.
And so it really just highlights that importance of understanding
Yeah.
like your own needs and motivations before you even get into those conversations about ownership.
Before you even think about percentages and
Exactly.
contract.
And I was thinking like maybe if Peter had been more honest with himself about like his need for support, he could have maybe explored other options.
Like what?
Like maybe a mentor or like joining an entrepreneur network.
Yeah, great idea.
Something like that where he could, get that support that he needed without necessarily having to give up equity.
So true. And that's why this book is so good. It's like have those honest conversations with yourself and with your potential partners about what are my motivations? What are my fears? What are my expectations?
Right.
Like lay it all out on the table.
Okay, so let's say we've done that soul searching. We're clear on our individual whys.
Yes.
We're feeling good. We're ready to start building our partnership charter.
Okay.
Where do we begin?
Okay, so as we talked about earlier, it really all begins with a shared vision.
Okay.
But I think it's worth kind of repeating because it's really the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Okay.
You and your partner need to be crystal clear on where you're going together. What does success look like for both of you?
Okay, and then the mission statement. Right?
Yes, the mission statement.
That's how you're going to achieve that vision.
Exactly. So it's about getting into the specifics. What will your business do? What problem are you solving? What value are you bringing to the market?
And I really like that Mail 2000 example.
Yeah.
That they had this vision of improving service and reducing cost, but their mission was even more focused.
It was.
Like they wanted to build this specific printing network across the country.
Right. So it's about how you're going to get there, not just the end goal.
Okay. And then, of course, we have our values. We touched on this before the break, but can you just explain a little bit more about why they're so crucial to a partnership?
I think values are really the heart of your business. They are what guide all of your decisions and shape the company culture. And they're not just about, feeling good or having a good mission statement on your website. They actually have real world consequences.
And that's why I think that Yahoo example that keeps coming up is so helpful.
It is.
Because they were famously so frugal. Even when they were making millions of dollars, it was a part of everything they did.
Yeah. It was a core value.
Right.
And it informed every single aspect of their operations.
And so I think that's a good takeaway for our listeners. Your values should be more than just words. They should be reflected in every decision you make.
Exactly. They should be baked into the DNA of your business.
Okay. So we have our vision, mission, and values.
We're doing good.
We're feeling good, but we need a roadmap.
We do.
To bring this vision to life, right?
Yes. It's time to develop a strategic plan.
Okay.
Think of it as your partnership's GPS system, guiding you toward your goals.
Okay. And so, what are some of the key components that go into a strategic plan?
Well, I think a strategic plan can sound really intimidating, especially for new entrepreneurs. But I think this book does a really good job of breaking it down.
Okay.
So you need to define your short-term and long-term goals, figure out who your ideal customer is, identify your resources, and then anticipate any roadblocks you might face.
Okay. And I think it's important to, again, this is something that you might be tempted to make very rigid and set in stone.
Right.
But really,
your business is going to be constantly changing.
And your strategic plan needs to evolve with it, so it's a living document, not just a one-and-done kind of thing.
And the book actually talks about IntoQ, an IT company.
Oh, yeah. They had that
very open and transparent management style.
And they baked that into their strategic plan from day one.
From day one, which is amazing. And years later, they've actually retained their core team, which in the IT industry is
unheard of.
Pretty rare.
Really impressive.
And I think it just goes to show that the strategic plan can be a powerful tool for building a strong company culture.
It can.
Which is so important because a positive and supportive work environment, that's how you attract and retain top talent.
100% agree.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture stuff. Vision, mission, values, strategic plan.
We're laying the groundwork.
Yeah, but now let's talk about, the elephant in the room.
Oh, here we go, the big one.
Money, finance.
Finances, the lifeblood of any business.
It is, but it can also be a major source of conflict if partners aren't on the same page. So I think the book is really good about this. It stresses the importance of having those, sometimes uncomfortable money conversations early on in the partnership.
Like what?
Like, how are we going to fund this venture? Are we going to bootstrap? Are we going to seek funding?
Okay.
Are we comfortable taking on debt? What are our priorities? Do we want to reinvest all of our profits for growth, or do we want to start taking distributions sooner rather than later?
Right, and it's about, I think,
aligning those expectations,
right.
Finding a financial model that really works for everyone involved, and it often requires compromise and flexibility.
And I like that example of Jeff and Beth again.
Oh, Jeff and Beth.
He wanted that big salary.
Yeah, he did.
But his partners pushed back.
Smart partners.
Right. They knew it wasn't right for their business.
It wasn't sustainable.
So they negotiated, they talked it out, they eventually landed on a number that everyone felt comfortable with.
That's great.
So it's a good reminder, open and honest communication about finances is so key.
It's everything.
It really is.
Nobody wants to have those arguments. Nobody wants to be surprised by unexpected expenses or disagreements about how profits should be used.
Okay, so we tackled some of the big picture stuff. Vision, mission, values, strategic plan, and finances.
We're moving right along.
Yeah. So now let's get into the nitty-gritty of ownership.
Okay, this is a fun one.
This is where things can get really interesting.
It is.
Because this is where you define who owns what percentage of the company.
Exactly.
And this can be a really tricky conversation to have, especially when everyone is bringing different resources and skills to the table.
Right. And I think the book does a really good job of highlighting how ownership isn't just about that initial investment.
Right.
It's about recognizing and valuing all contributions. Time, expertise, networks, even those, aha moments when somebody comes up with a brilliant idea.
Exactly.
All of that needs to be factored into the equation.
And you need to be really clear about
You
what each ownership stake means. What does it entitle you to? What are those financial rewards? What's the decision-making power?
Exactly. All of that needs to be spelled out to avoid confusion and resentment later on.
And I know we've talked about, let's say the 50-50 split. It sounds really easy.
It does, but even that seemingly simple solution can lead to trouble.
Yeah.
The book talks about this software company where one partner felt like their contributions weren't fairly reflected in the ownership.
And it created tension.
So much tension. Even though on paper the split was equal, they felt undervalued. And it really created this rift in the partnership.
Yeah, so it's not just about, like, the numbers on a piece of paper.
Right.
It's about how people perceive those numbers.
The power dynamics.
Right.
Perceive value.
And that's why I think the partnership charter encourages you to explore different ownership models.
Exactly.
Like majority-minority ownership, or even just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, sometimes you need a more nuanced approach to really reflect the reality of each partner's contribution.
I liked the example in the book about those 5 entrepreneurs who were launching that new product.
Oh, that was a good one.
And negotiating that ownership became like this huge test of their friendship.
Yeah, because money can do that.
Right.
It can really test those bonds.
And they got really creative with it.
They did.
They ended up issuing additional shares to balance things out, which I thought was like a really neat solution.
It's a great example of how flexibility and that willingness to kind of problem solve together can lead to a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
It's not about one person winning and the other person losing. It's about finding a structure that benefits everyone.
Okay, so we had the ownership sorted out,
Sure.
but now we need to figure out who does what.
Okay, yeah.
Who's driving the bus?
This is where we define roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
You know, who's steering the ship, who's navigating, who's keeping the engine room running smoothly.
I like those analogies.
It's all about teamwork.
Right.
Making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction.
But I think the book had a really good warning about, like, not falling into that trap.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Of, like, ego.
Ego or perceived status.
Yes, where everybody wants to be the CEO.
Everybody wants to be the CEO, but who's going to take out the trash?
Right, exactly. And so it's really about, like,
being honest with yourself.
Yeah, like, what are you actually good at?
What do you enjoy doing? Where are your weaknesses? And then finding roles where you can really shine.
And they had that Collins Street Bakery.
Oh, yeah. They had the fruitcakes.
From, like, 1896.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And they were so successful.
And they really had this, like, perfect match where one partner was, like, the baking genius.
The creative visionary.
Focus on the product. And then the other one was just a natural salesman. So he handled all the marketing and business development.
It's like a match made in heaven.
It really is.
You know, they just complemented each other perfectly. And I think that's a great lesson for any partnership.
Find your strengths and play to them.
Exactly.
And I think the book also talked about, like, even if you and your partner have similar skill sets, you can still divide responsibilities effectively.
Yeah, there's always a way.
Like the Elco, the electric boat company.
Oh, I loved that one.
One was really in the weeds, like day-to-day operations. And the other one was like big picture strategy.
Right. And so they found a way to make that work.
There you go.
And so I think the key takeaway here is, like, there's no one size fits all.
Absolutely no.
When it comes to roles and responsibilities.
It's all about finding the structure that works for your specific partnership.
Right.
Recognizing each other's strengths, aligning them with the needs of the business.
And then, like, all of this gets spelled out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the partnership charter.
No room for ambiguity here.
Clarity is key.
Yeah. And speaking of clarity, I think we need to talk about titles. Oh, yeah, the title controversy.
So everybody wants that fancy CEO title, right?
Who doesn't want to be the CEO?
But is that always necessary, especially in the early stages?
It's a great question.
I mean, I know it can be important for
externally facing roles.
Right.
You know, when you're dealing with investors or potential clients, having that CEO title can lend a certain amount of credibility.
Oh.
But internally, I think it's more important that everyone understands what they're doing.
Right.
Regardless of what their business card says.
So substance over style.
Exactly.
Make sure everyone is clear on their roles and responsibilities.
And sometimes I think avoiding those inflated titles can actually be beneficial.
Oh, so?
Because it fosters a more collaborative and less hierarchical work environment, which can be really valuable.
Okay.
Especially in the early stages when you're a small, nimble team. You don't want to create this sense of
like levels.
A rigid hierarchy right out of the gate.
Right. And then, so those fancy titles, maybe not the most important thing to focus on in the early stages.
No, I agree.
So what happens if your business grows and you need to start thinking about bringing in outside managers?
Oh, that's a great question.
How do you navigate that transition without like disrupting the partnership?
Well, it's a valid concern, You've poured your heart and soul into building this company, and the thought of someone outside the partnership coming in and maybe taking over some of those responsibilities can feel really scary.
Yeah.
But, I think it's important to recognize that bringing in outside managers can be really crucial for your continued growth and success.
Okay.
As your business expands, you might need expertise that you and your partner simply don't have.
So it's not a sign of weakness to bring in outside people.
Not at all. It's
But-
actually, it's a sign of smart leadership.
Okay.
Recognizing your limitations and being open to bringing in people who can fill those gaps.
And the book actually suggests being proactive about this.
Yes, love that.
So, like, having conversations early on about, okay, when would we even consider bringing in outside managers?
Mm-hmm.
What are the criteria? What are the qualities?
What would that process look like?
Exactly, right.
So you're not scrambling at the last minute when you're already feeling overwhelmed?
And you're not, like, just bringing in anybody.
Right. You want to be thoughtful about it.
You want the right people.
And make sure it's a good fit.
And they highlight how important it is to find people that not only have the skills and experience,
Mm-hmm.
but that they also align with your company culture and values.
Because those cultural clashes can be just as disruptive as conflicts between partners.
That's a good point.
You want to make sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction.
So it might not be easy bringing in those outside managers,
It's not always easy.
but it's often necessary for growth.
It can be, sometimes the best way to lead is to empower others to take on leadership roles within the company.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about compensation.
Okay, let's talk money.
We talked about, like, finances in a more general sense, but how do you make sure everyone gets paid fairly for their contributions?
Well, this is where things can get a little sticky.
It can.
Even partners who are perfectly aligned on their vision, their values, everything, can still have very different expectations and needs when it comes to compensation.
Yeah, it's not just salary, right?
No, compensation can include so many things. Salary, dividends, profit sharing, bonuses,
Right.
even perks like company cars or health insurance.
Okay.
It's about finding a model that works for your business and really reflects the contributions of each partner.
And the book emphasizes thinking about, like, your company's life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you in those early stages where you're reinvesting every
Trapping, every dollar goes back into the business? Or are you a more mature company that can start prioritizing those distributions to partners?
So it's really about
In
having,
an honest,
about those finances.
what are your financial needs?
What are your expectations?
What's your risk tolerance?
Yeah. And I really like that example about workmen and partners.
Oh, yeah. They were so transparent.
Right. They were just like an open book when it came to their finances.
And they really tied their compensation to the company's overall performance.
Which is, I
It
think,
was just a smart approach.
yeah, because it really does foster that sense of, like, shared ownership.
Absolutely.
And prevents those, like, potential conflicts later on.
Totally.
So whether you're opting for a salary, a profit-sharing model, some kind of combination, I think the key is to find a system that feels equitable to everyone involved.
Absolutely. And to document those agreements very clearly in your partnership charter.
Okay.
So there's no confusion, no room for misinterpretation.
No ambiguity.
You got to spell it out.
And then when do you start actually taking money out of the business?
That is a great question. And it's a tough one for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
You're probably working your tail off. You're not making a lot of money.
Right.
And it can be really tempting to start paying yourself a salary right away.
I can imagine.
But that's not always the smartest move.
Okay, so what's, like, a better approach then?
I think it's crucial to have a plan in place.
Okay.
Set some realistic expectations, make sure everyone's on the same page about that timeline for compensation.
And the book had that great story about Mail 2000 where the founders actually chose not to take salaries for 6 years.
6 years. Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's incredible.
That's dedication.
They were laser focused on building the business.
It paid off for them.
And it paid off. I mean, they ended up selling to UPS.
Exactly.
So sometimes delaying that gratification,
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard, but it can lead to big rewards down the line.
It can.
But of course, not everyone's in a position to go without a salary for years.
Right. Everybody has bills to pay.
Exactly.
So it's about finding a balance, between the needs of the business and the financial realities of each partner.
And the book really encourages, again, having those honest conversations
Mm-hmm.
about what do you need to survive? What are your personal financial goals? Let's create a plan that works for everybody.
Exactly. Maybe one partner can work more hours in exchange for a higher salary, or maybe you structure a profit-sharing model that allows for some payout even in the early stages.
Okay.
There are so many different ways to get creative with it.
The key is like transparency.
Transparency is key.
Yeah.
Creativity, communication.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Vision, ownership, roles, finances.
We're on a roll.
But there's another, like, essential element that we need to discuss.
Okay, what's that?
The board.
The board.
I think a lot of people associate boards with, like, giant corporations.
Oh, for sure.
But the book actually argues that even small businesses can benefit from having a board.
Absolutely. I think there's this misconception that boards are only for these huge publicly traded companies.
Right.
But they can provide so much value to businesses of all sizes, even in the early stages.
And they tell that story about a company that only brought in outside board members after, like, years of conflict.
Oh, wow.
And it just makes you wonder, like, could they have avoided some of those problems if they'd established a board earlier?
It's definitely possible, because having a board brings accountability, it brings strategic guidance, and it brings fresh perspectives.
Okay.
So it can really help you avoid some of those common pitfalls that partnerships fall into.
So what are, like, some of the key benefits of having a board, even for a small business?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about accountability.
Okay.
Having a board helps partners stay focused and make those sound business decisions.
So it's like having that, like, experienced mentor looking over your shoulder, giving you advice.
Exactly, keeping you on track. They've
Yeah.
been there, they've done that, they've seen it all.
And they also bring, like, external expertise, right?
Absolutely. Board members can offer fresh perspectives,
Oh, okay.
challenge your assumptions, help you see things from a different angle, and they can also provide valuable connections.
Okay.
Open doors to new opportunities.
So how do you go about building this, like, dream team?
Right. So you want to start by tapping into your existing network.
Okay.
Talk to your mentors, advisors, colleagues, see if they have any recommendations, attend industry events, networking functions, put yourself out there.
Right.
And then, when you've identified some potential candidates, treat it like a real job interview.
Okay.
Get to know them, assess their skills, make sure they're a good cultural fit.
Because it is a big decision.
It is
Can really
make or break your business.
Yeah.
Having the right board can be a game changer.
Okay, so we know why we need a board.
Mm-hmm.
We know the type of people that we should be looking for.
Yes.
But where do you actually find these amazing board members?
Well, as I said, start with your existing network. Talk to your mentors, advisors, colleagues, see if they have recommendations, attend industry events, networking functions. You never know who you might meet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, once you've identified some potential candidates, treat it like a real job interview.
Okay, like a...
Go to know them, assess their skills,
Yeah.
make sure they're a good cultural fit.
Right, it's a big decision.
It is.
It shouldn't be taken lightly.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so we've talked about vision, ownership, roles, finances, even boards, but there's, like, one more element
What's that?
that we need to address, and it's a big one: personality.
Oh, the personality piece.
Yeah, specifically how different personality styles can impact a partnership.
Yes, this is where that human element really comes into play. You can have a perfectly crafted partnership charter, but if you and your partners don't understand how to navigate those personality differences,
Things can still go wrong.
things can go very wrong.
And so the book really emphasizes that self-awareness piece.
Yeah, knowing yourself, right, understanding.
And how you interact with others.
Exactly.
Exactly. And it's not about labeling people, putting them in boxes.
Right.
It's about understanding those differences and using them to your advantage.
Okay,
And there are some great tools out there, like the DISC profile,
I've heard of that.
the MBTI. These assessments can give you so much insight into how you and your partner approach communication, decision-making, conflict resolution.
And I think by having that information up front, you can kind of anticipate, like, those potential friction points.
Right. Get ahead of it
Yeah.
instead of being blindsided.
Okay, and it's not about changing each other.
No, it's about adapting.
Okay.
Finding ways to work together more harmoniously.
And they had that example of Jeff, Beth, and Sarah at Star System.
Oh, yeah. They have very
was great.
different personality style.
And initially, it led to some misunderstanding, some tension.
Yeah.
But once they understood those differences, they were able to adjust their communication styles and work together much more effectively.
And they have a great exercise in the book where they talk about creating a list of, like agreements, like behaviors that each partner is willing to like adjust to improve the partnership.
So instead of trying to change each other, you're finding ways to like meet in the middle. So it's
Okay.
really a proactive approach. It's all about adaptability and compromise.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Vision, ownership, roles, finances, boards, even personality styles.
So we're almost there.
But there's like one last and maybe most important element we need to discuss. Values.
Yes, values. The foundation of it all.
Yeah, because they really are at the heart of a successful partnership.
They are. They guide everything you do. They shape the company culture.
And the book stresses that they're not like just some fluffy...
Pretty good concept.
Yeah, right. They have real-world implications.
Real-world consequences for how you run your business, how you interact with each other, how you interact with the world.
And I think this is where, like that story about the family business.
Oh, the one that almost fell apart.
Yeah, because of conflicting values.
I remember that one. They took that personal values test, and it just like revealed all these hidden tensions that they weren't even aware of.
So it's really about not only being clear on your own values, but understanding.
And respecting the values of your partner.
Okay, so how do you actually have those conversations? Because that can be...
It can be tricky.
Yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable.
I think it's about approaching it with an open mind and a willingness to really listen and learn.
Okay.
You know, start by reflecting on your own values, what's truly important to you, what are your non-negotiables, what principles guide your decision-making.
And then you have those honest conversations with your potential partner.
Yeah.
About what are your values, where do we align?
Where are the potential conflicts?
Right. And is that it, if you uncover some conflicts?
That's the deal breaker.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's an opportunity for conversation.
Okay.
You know, recognizing those differences,
Yeah.
having a dialogue about how to navigate them. Maybe you can find ways to reconcile those differences. Maybe you need to develop strategies for, maybe you can find ways to reconcile those differences. Maybe you need to develop strategies for working around them.
Well,
The key is to be proactive. Get those conversations happening early on.
and the book has a really helpful, framework.
It does?
For exploring values. So it suggests, creating a list of values that are important to each partner. Yeah. And then you compare the list and you see, okay, where are the overlaps?
Where are the potential friction points?
Right.
Exactly.
And it's a great starting point for those, sometimes...
Tricky conversations, yeah.
Yeah, because remember, it's not about one person being right and the other person being wrong. It's about figuring out, how can we work together effectively, even if we don't see eye to eye on absolutely everything? So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive into the partnership charter, I think it's helpful to think about.
Oh, I like analogies.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think about building a successful partnership like constructing a building.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
So you need a solid foundation, and that's like your shared vision, values, and goals. You need a clear blueprint. That's your partnership charter. And you need, the right materials.
What are the materials?
The materials are your combined skills and resources and commitment.
Yeah, that's a good one, like the mortar that holds it all together.
And then, of course, you need a team of skilled and dedicated builders, and that's you and your partner.
Yes, the dynamic duo.
And that's what this book is all about.
It is.
It's giving you the knowledge and tools to create a partnership that is built to last.
Absolutely. And, we've covered so much ground today.
So much, yeah.
I mean, we talked about vision, ownership, roles, finances, even personality styles. It's a lot to process.
But I think it's so important because those are all those critical elements that go into creating a truly successful partnership.
And the beauty of the partnership charter is that it helps you get ahead of those potential problems. It's like having a roadmap for navigating those choppy waters that inevitably come up in any business partnership.
And I think something you said earlier that really stuck with me is it's that ounce of prevention.
Yes.
It's worth a pound of cure. So it's so much easier to address those potential issues early on than to try and fix them after they've already caused damage.
Totally. I always tell my clients, it's better to have those tough conversations up front, even if they're a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
Because it will save you so much heartache and headache down the road.
Okay, so let's talk about fairness, because this is something that can be a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Because what feels fair to one person doesn't always feel fair to the other.
Fairness is so subjective.
It really is.
It's shaped by our values, our expectations, even our cultural background. What feels balanced to you might feel completely off to your partner.
And that's why I think the book introduces this idea of interpersonal equity. It's acknowledging that fairness isn't just about money.
It's not just about the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's also about recognition. It's about control. It's about those less tangible rewards that make people feel valued and appreciated.
It's about feeling respected, I think.
Absolutely. It's about making sure that each partner feels like their contributions are recognized and rewarded in a way that's meaningful to them.
And the book uses this really great analogy of like a scale.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good visual.
It's not about keeping those sides perfectly balanced
right
at all times.
No, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that over the long haul, the scale tips fairly in both directions.
Okay.
There will be times when one partner's contributing more or when the rewards seem a little bit uneven, but the goal is to strive for balance
over time,
over the course of the partnership.
And the book actually suggests an exercise that I really liked for exploring fairness. It's about making lists.
Oh, I love lists.
It's all about the lists.
So what kind of lists are we talking about?
So each partner makes a list of what they contribute to the partnership, what they want to get out of it, and what they perceive their partner to be contributing and wanting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're kind of getting those assumptions out on the table.
Right, exactly.
And having a dialogue about what feels fair to each person.
And I thought the example of Beth from Star Systems was really helpful. She realized that she wanted the opportunity to own more of the company down the line. So they ended up creating an agreement where both minority partners could actually buy additional shares after 3 years.
That's awesome.
And it just shows how, like, these conversations about fairness can lead to really creative solutions that benefit everyone.
Totally. And I think it's an ongoing conversation, Yeah. As your business grows and changes, you might need to revisit those agreements, make adjustments along the way.
Okay, we talked about fairness.
Check.
Now let's dive into those what-if scenarios that every partnership, I think, inevitably faces.
Oh, yes. The curveballs?
Yes. It's like life is constantly throwing curveballs, and you just got to be ready to catch them.
You do, and that's where scenario planning comes in.
Okay.
So it's about thinking through those potential challenges and opportunities, the things that could impact your partnership, both positively and negatively, that maybe you haven't even considered yet.
So, like, what if one partner wants to retire early, but the other one is not ready? Or what if you get a sudden buyout offer?
Ooh, good one.
Yeah, or the market just tanks.
Yeah, those are all great examples.
And so the book provides this, like, really structured process for, like, brainstorming those what-if scenarios.
Yeah, I love that they have a process for this because it can feel really overwhelming to think about all those potential scenarios.
And they actually have a list of, like, some potential scenarios to consider, which I thought was really helpful.
Oh, like what?
Like personal challenges, like an illness or a divorce even.
Yeah. Wow.
And then business challenges like
market downturn,
product failure.
Yeah, those are all important to consider.
And it includes, like, positive scenarios too.
Yeah, like that.
Like, what if your business is so successful that you need to scale really quickly?
Okay. Yeah, how would you handle that?
Right. So it's not just about the negative stuff.
It's about being prepared for anything.
Exactly. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
I love that. I'm going to write that down.
So they have, like, a multi-step process for scenario planning. You start individually brainstorming potential scenarios, that you come back together as partners, you share your ideas, and you build upon them.
Okay, so you're getting all those different perspectives out on the table.
And the goal is to create, like, this really comprehensive list of potential challenges and opportunities.
And then what?
And then you think about, okay, how would we actually handle each of these scenarios?
Yeah, what decisions would we need to make? What actions would we need to take? What resources would we need to mobilize?
It's about having, like, a framework in place.
A game plan.
Yeah, so you're not starting from scratch.
When what hits the fan.
And you can actually document all of that in your partnership charter.
You can.
So you have it there.
It's all laid out.
Okay, so we talked about fairness, scenario planning, but let's be real, like, conflict is inevitable.
Oh, it's going to happen.
In any partnership. So how do we actually address those disagreements in a constructive way?
Right.
That's not going to, like, tear the partnership apart.
Well, I think the book is really helpful here because it outlines this spectrum of conflict resolution strategies, starting with, informal negotiation and then escalating to more formal approaches like mediation. And then as a last resort, arbitration or even litigation.
So it's like recognizing
not all conflicts are created equal.
Yeah, and they require different approaches.
Some disagreements you can work out over a cup of coffee.
Right.
Others might require a neutral third party to come in and help facilitate a conversation. And then, in some cases, legal intervention might be necessary.
And I think it's really important to have
like a plan
in place for how you're going to handle these situations.
You don't want to be trying to figure it out in the heat of the moment when emotions are running high.
Exactly.
So the book suggests, outline that process in your partnership charter. Maybe you start with a casual conversation, then you escalate to mediation if needed, and then only as a last resort do you consider legal action.
And they really are big fans of mediation in the book.
They are.
And I can see why, because
it works. It's all about finding a solution that works for everyone involved. It's not about winning or losing.
Right.
It's about preserving the partnership, finding a path forward.
And I thought that story in the book about that partnership that was literally on the verge of collapse.
Oh, I remember that one.
They were ready to throw in the towel.
Yeah.
But they went through mediation, and they were actually able to
salvage it.
Yeah.
To communicate, to find some common ground, to reach a solution that worked for both of them.
And it just shows that conflict doesn't have to be
the end.
The end, yeah. And it can actually be an opportunity
to grow stronger,
to strengthen that bond,
to become more resilient.
Yeah. Okay. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the partnership charter, I want to emphasize that this book isn't just a collection of theories and ideas.
No, it's a practical guide.
Yeah, it's full of actionable strategies.
Tools you can use.
For building a strong and successful partnership.
Absolutely.
It's about being proactive, having those tough conversations.
Doing the work.
Yes, and creating a foundation built on trust, understanding, and a shared purpose.
And remember, your partnership charter isn't a static document. It needs to evolve along with your partnership, reflect the growth of your business.
Right.
The changes that inevitably happen in any relationship.
Absolutely.
So take what you've learned today, apply it to your own entrepreneurial journey, and build a partnership that can weather any storm.
And that's it for this week's deep dive into the partnership charter. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.